Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Skip Rutherford, and I am Dean of the University of Arkansas Clinton School of Public Service. I want to welcome you here today to another in our series of public lectures. We're honored to have our speaker today, Big Brothers Big Sisters, and I'll let Todd Moore introduce her. But Big Brothers Big Sisters is such an important organization in Central Arkansas. And Ben Beaumont, who works here at the Clinton Schools at the back, was recently named Big Brother of the Year for that organization. So the Clinton School has a special tie. I also want to say that today's a very special day on a completely different subject, and it is through Tom's Shoes, a day without shoes. And I want to acknowledge that. I have shoes on. My wife told me today that if I came barefoot, that it would be an embarrassment to humankind. So I do have shoes on, but I did spend a lot of time this morning before coming here with my shoes off, and may sneak them off this afternoon just to participate in part of the day. Bottom line is Tom's Shoes does a fabulous job of providing shoes. Buy a pair of shoes, give a pair of shoes, and these shoes go to areas where there's tremendous amount of disease related to foot problems, and also absences from school because kids cannot get there because they don't have shoes to wear. So it prevents a whole bunch of issues of getting shoes to kids. We're particularly excited about it because this year, for the first time, Clinton School students will partner with Tom's Shoes. And we will have two of our students working with, directly or indirectly with Tom's Shoes in Ethiopia going this summer. So anyway, you will see Emily Fisher, who is at the back, who sent me an email this morning, a Clinton School student, and said, "Is it okay to go without shoes?" And I said, "It is perfectly okay to go without shoes." And I appreciate that work, and I appreciate the work that Tom's Shoes are doing. To introduce our speaker today is someone who knows the Big Brothers Big Sisters organization very well, Todd Moore. Todd Moore worked with Big Brothers Big Sisters in Kansas for 5 years. He's a graduate of the University of Kansas. He's also worked with the United Way. When he came to the Clinton School, Todd began his project work on a project in Newport, Arkansas, on the Delta Visual Arts Center. And he worked with an organization to help establish and rebuild that Delta town, particularly the downtown area. He then, last summer, went to China, working with the American Chamber of Commerce on project work in China. And he is completing his final project with the Kansas Volunteer Commission. So Todd has done great work at the Clinton School. But I think he will tell you that one of his great passions is his love for and support of Big Brothers Big Sisters. Would you welcome, please, Todd Moore.
Thank you, Dean. Just want to take a quick opportunity to thank the Dean and the staff and the faculty here. For all intents and purposes, this is my last introduction as a student here. And I want to thank the school for the opportunity to be a part of a building that has become a sanctuary of hope and a sanctuary of service. Our speaker today, Karen Mathis, the CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters, helps bridge this idea of hope and service. So I want to talk to you today about these two ideas of hope and service. As the dean said, I was formerly employed with Big Brothers Big Sisters, and I want to tell you a quick story about my experience as a case manager. I was an executive for them. I've worked in a rural area for them. But my first experience was a clear case of hope. We were doing an event called Big Fur Days, and then I don't know if they call them that anymore, but it's an event where we match unmatched littles on our wait list to mentors in the community, volunteers in the community to help try and facilitate relationships outside of the traditional match, community-based match. A fraternity and sorority in this case were the sponsors of this event, and we pulled out a group of 30 kids on our wait list to bring them out to this park in Lawrence, Kansas. Now, Lawrence, Kansas is a picturesque area. It has rolling hills in eastern Kansas, beautiful rolling hills, beautiful green. It looks a lot like Arkansas, but toned down. Not as much, not as many trees. So we're at this beautiful picnic site. We're there. We're matching these fraternity brothers and these sorority sisters with these kids, and I have one kid, his name's Jimmy. And Jimmy, we have great kids in Big Brothers Big Sisters, right? Great kids. But there's always a kid or two that gives you a little, put you in a little twist. Now Jimmy was tough because he wouldn't talk. He wouldn't engage. So when I matched Jimmy with this fraternity brother, I said, I'm going to keep an eye on this match throughout the day. So Jimmy comes up to this big, and I introduce them, and the big says, "What do you want to do?" And it's this big hill on Bucky's. It's 200 feet worth of slope. And so Jimmy says, looks around and says, "I want to roll down this hill." And so the mentor looks at me, and I'm like, go ahead. I mean, what am I going to say? So they get to the top of the hill, and they roll down this hill. And they get to the bottom, and I'm watching. I'm keeping a very close eye. And they walk up, and they say a few words as they walk back up the hill, and they get to the top of the hill, and the big says, "What do you want to do now?" And Jimmy says, "Let's do it again." And they roll down that hill again. So for 2 hours, Jimmy and this big roll down this hill, saying, maybe 4 or 5 sentences apiece every time they walk up the hill. By the end of the day, I'm taking Jimmy home, and Jimmy just can't stop talking about this guy. He's like, "I want to be a part of this fraternity. I'm going to the University of Kansas. I'm going to do all these great things." This is the power. This is the hope that mentoring gives to people. Now, that's an anecdote, right? And if anyone that knows me knows that I'm all about data. So it's important to me that there's empirical data, there's research-based data that supports that type of anecdotal piece. And Big Brothers Big Sisters has that in spades. Of course, everyone knows about the research study, that the groundbreaking research study done in '95 on Big Brothers Big Sisters. 52% of the kids are less likely to skip school, 48% less likely to use drugs, and on and on and on. So this is the type of hope that this organization, and that Karen leads this organization as they go forward. Now, the service aspect, our speaker today exemplifies that. She's the president and CEO of one of the largest donor-based volunteer network of mentors for youth. She's also served as a top executive with the American Bar Association and with the Central European and Eurasian Initiative Institute. I always get that mixed up because it's called CELI, and there's no L. She's also a Phi Beta Kappa graduate from the University of Denver, received a law degree from the University of Colorado Law School, and has honorary degrees from 5 other institutions. She has been honored by many organizations, including the National Network for Youth, the U.S. Air Force, and the National Association of Women Lawyers. And she was a big sister. Let me just add that not only was she a big sister in Philadelphia, I believe, but she had to go through the process a number of times because the executive director there thought she was too busy. So she had to show some perseverance and dedication to the organization to become a big sister. So, Dean, classmates, friends, please join me in welcoming an ambassador of hope and service, Karen Mathis.
Thank you, Todd. You're an inspiration to us all. Dean, faculty, students here at the Clinton School, friends and professionals in the youth-serving industry, quote unquote, of Big Brothers Big Sisters, and all of you here in the Little Rock area who are working for our children. It is really with great anticipation that I joined you today. It's an honor and a privilege for me. I have tremendous admiration and affection for our 42nd president and for his transformative presidency. It's actually been a privilege of over 25 years to know Secretary Clinton. We both worked on women in the legal profession issues through the American Bar Association together. When I was asked to come and give remarks, I was told that I needed to speak about my life in service. And I think speaking about one's own life journey has got to be one of the hardest assignments that I've had. As a president of the ABA, I was on the road 330 out of 365 days and spoke several times, usually each day, but nobody ever asked me to speak about my life. And so it really made me think, because I don't believe my story is ready for prime time, and I hope not a memoir yet. And like most lives, like your lives, I have been very fortunate. Fortunate to be born in the United States of America, to live in a nation of opportunity, where education has been affordable, where friends and families were protective, and where children were encouraged to dream. President Clinton was in the vanguard of the baby boomers, and I came into the world shortly thereafter, born on Election Day, 1950. In Providence, Rhode Island, the first child of Betty and Charlie Young. 50 years later, I prepared to deliver the first law school commencement address that I was asked to give. And I wondered what wisdom I could impart to bright young scholars, and there are many of you here in this room today, what I could suggest that you would take to make your marks in the world. And so I tried to distill the rules that I'd lived by into a top 10 list, a la Mr. Letterman. And I suggested to graduates these 10 things: that they live within their means, because if they didn't, they were going to live by somebody else's rules. That they be respectful and generous to others, because in the end, it would mean they'd be more successful for themselves. And that whatever they gave to others, they were going to receive more in return. And I think our big brothers and big sisters can say that that's true. Never take the last dollar off the table. Be honest with themselves and with others. Follow Eleanor Roosevelt's advice to do one thing every day that scares you. Don't burn bridges, but if singed, repair them. And that because I was speaking to law students, I told them and believe that law is an exciting profession. Enjoy it. Remember why they became lawyers, and also to remember that they are doing good and to be about something. So that was the advice that I gave to them then. It's the advice that I've probably given in 4 or 5 more commencement speeches, because it's really helped me. You know, when I was growing up, I didn't know a single woman lawyer, not one. Nobody told me I couldn't be a lawyer, but also nobody told me I could. There were a lot of reasons why I did look to law as a profession, but one was my mom telling me that I argued so well that I should be paid for doing it. By the time I did get to law school, there were a few other like-minded women. There were 23 women in my law school class of 150, and we felt like the Marines. We were the few, the proud. And you know, it's hard to believe that almost 40 years has passed, and that the first generation of women who came into the law in significant numbers are now reaching their 60s. My generation, the baby boom, is now thinking about retirement. It's a time when reflection is natural. So as I thought about my remarks today, I realized maybe it's not so difficult after all to talk about my life. You know, you've often heard about white-collar families and blue-collar families. Mine was a no-collar family. My dad was an NCO in the U.S. Army, and I attended 8 schools by the time I got into 8th grade. There were 3 major influences in my life growing up: the nuns, the military, and the family. With all of our family's moves, my mom made a very valiant effort to keep her 4 daughters having some continuity in their education, and that meant parochial school. From my teachers, the nuns, I developed a love of learning, a belief that education was a path to success, and a faith in giving to others. My dad instilled military values in each of his 4 daughters: honor for a job well done, respect for others, and love of this country. Oh yes, and never be late. And family. I was fortunate to have 3 sisters to play with and to protect, strong parents, and a close-knitted extended family. They watched over me, and they allowed me to test my own limits. I'm often struck by how fortunate I was to have this cocoon of support growing up, and I know that it's influenced my life choices repeatedly. I was also very privileged to graduate from high school at the end of the 1960s, when Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs made college possible for young people like me. Scholarships were available, government-backed financial aid was there, and interest rates were 3%. At the time I reached the University of Denver, I began to focus my charitable and my nonprofit efforts on children. And actually, Todd, I became a big sister in Denver, Colorado at the university when I was 18. And I did so for 2 years. The CEO in Southeast Pennsylvania still doesn't think I'm stable enough to be matched. After law school, my first opportunity to make a difference came at a national meeting of young lawyers at the American Bar Association. In fact, I met last night, after 25 years, one of the fellows I met then. Some of you know him, Patrick Henry Hayes, the 5-time mayor of North Little Rock. And you know, meeting several hundred newly minted JDs who are all concerned with doing good as well as doing well has really led to lifetime friends and my work in the legal profession. You know, Harrison Tweed once said, "I have a high opinion of lawyers. With all their faults, they're better to work with, or play with, or fight with, or drink with than any other nature of mankind." And I have to say that my years as a lawyer, working in bar associations, with my friends, trying to do good, has been invaluable. It's kept me fresh, it's kept me energized, and it's kept me making a difference. As lawyers, I believe we receive an excellent education, and it prepares us for a historic role, that of being a citizen lawyer in the United States. I have several heroes that I think about in that respect. Thomas Jefferson changed history when he drafted the Declaration of Independence. John Adams ensured that states' rights and liberties would be included in that declaration and the U.S. Constitution. Abraham Lincoln changed history by abolishing slavery. Lawyers like John Foster Dulles and William Fulbright formulated foreign policy. Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal redirected our nation, and Thurgood Marshall, one of my great inspirations, helped to heal our nation, suffering a legacy of slavery and racial bias. And Sarah Weddington, as a young woman, helped protect a woman's right to choose. All of these people were lawyers. They were also citizens, and I believe that lawyers have both influence and access, that these individuals encouraged me and continue to encourage lawyers to give back by using our intellect and education to help our communities, to help our profession, and to help our fellow men and women. So 3 major themes have dominated my adult life, much of which has been spent in the law, and I'll share a little about them. My work in the legal profession, my work with children, and my work with the rule of law. You know, one thing we now know about young lawyers is that they are happiest when they are allowed to do pro bono work from the very beginning of their professional life. And I was blessed with amazing mentors who taught me the joy of helping others through the law. I have seen a real dichotomy in the legal profession, and I think mine may be the first generation of lawyers that was allowed or able to become wealthy practicing law. But it was also the generation that helped found the Peace Corps and VISTA and were Vietnam War protesters. So having had mentors who defended the poor, who started women's bars and minority bars, and who served as UN ambassadors for human rights, that helped me get my priorities right as a young professional. John Stuart Mill reminded us that the law is fundamentally about balance. It's a balance between society and individuals. It's the balance between freedom and security, between the need to enforce laws and the need to heal wounds, between the problems of the future and the demands of the moment. And so I was very fortunate to serve as president of the American Bar Association in a post-9/11 world, a world in which the rule of law was challenged in a variety of ways. Wiretaps were authorized without warrants. Extraordinary rendition mocked an 800-year bedrock of the American legal and common law system, habeas corpus. Stories of torture and atrocities at Abu Ghraib shocked the American conscience and the world's view of this nation. Attorney-client protections were being eroded in reaction to the greed and excess of American corporations, and the independence of judges and the judiciary was under attack. I saw firsthand how the rule of law, a concept we Americans take for granted daily, was being diminished even in our own land because of the fear that we carried of international terrorists. So around the world, nascent legal systems were and are under pressure, whether in the former Soviet Union or Africa, in China or Iraq. Powerful countervailing forces were moving towards threatening the integrity of legal systems. And I was privileged to work on a number of issues as a result. we took a look at the ABA of how we could expand the rule of law. We sent 5,000 judges and lawyers to the former Soviet republics to bring the idea of democracy and emerging democracies to them. It gave me a tremendous opportunity to work on those issues. And in fact, as Todd mentioned, to spend a year in Prague at the Central European and Eurasian Legal Initiative, that's the L, founded in 1999 to train judges, lawyers, and reformers in issues concerning human rights, the rule of law, and judging in a market economy. So, as I was thinking about what I would do as the president of the ABA, weighing our will and our resources, I determined that there were a couple of things that were simply too important not to try to work on. Service became the theme of my presidency, because when we serve, we acknowledge that we are part of a greater whole. I think my generation particularly has lived in an extraordinary era. We've enjoyed the benefits of democracy, excellent education, professional success. We've had freedom and prosperity. We've had good health and unprecedented life expectancy. At this point in our lives, service is not an obligation. It's an opportunity. For our generation, the call to service came early. Do you remember John F. Kennedy's inaugural address? "Ask not," he said, and we answered. We answered when we enlisted. We answered when we went to law school. We answered when we joined protests. We answered when we ran for office. We answered when we raised money for charity. We worked long hours for our clients, and then we worked a little more. We juggled our work and our family, and we answered. We were knocked down, and we failed. We struggled back to our feet, and in our struggle, we answered. Some of us were immoral, and in our collective shame, the rest of us answered. Some of us soared, and in our elective pride, we answered. As lawyers, as professionals, as Americans, we answered the call, and we serve because it's in our nature to do so, and we serve more than any other people in the world. And when we serve, we are more productive members of our community. We protect our legal system, we're better citizens, and we're better people. It seems so simple, doesn't it? Just 2 words. Ask not. They captured the generation of the Peace Corps. They captured the fight for civil rights and voting rights. They described the struggle for women's rights. And after study and counsel, we did develop 3 presidential initiatives. I've spoken about one, the rule of law. I'd like to share with you a little about the other 2. We talked about something called the second season of service. In 2006, there were 1.1 million lawyers in the United States. About 800,000 of them practiced law. The amazing thing was that 400,000 of them were baby boomers, and it was estimated that as many as 40,000 of them a year would begin retiring in the next 10 to 15 years. Now, of course, much of that changed in 2008 when our 401ks became 101ks. And now our younger partners and associates are wondering what those 80-year-olds are still doing working. But seriously, the loss of lawyers going forward is going to be profound on the bench, in the practice, and in the classroom. And so we created something called the second season of service to focus on the needs of lawyers who are transitioning from full-time practice to pursue other interests. The idea was, with that access, with the critical thinking skill, and with the education, we certainly could not allow that resource not to continue to give back to their communities. And so we created a web-based program to support the lawyers where they could go online and see where they could volunteer their help to communities and nonprofits and work with them. And it's ongoing, and it's very successful. And I'd send you to the website if you're interested in doing pro bono or legal services. But I want to talk to you about the one that's closest to my heart, and that was the Youth at Risk Initiative. You know, looking at our future, there's a very, very disturbing prognosis right in front of our face. Our nation's future is in the hands of today's youth. They are our most important asset. And yet, our youth are facing broader, deeper, and more complex problems than they ever have. And I like to say, in fact, I said it last night, this is all about self-interest. If you don't take care of the children of today, who's going to take care of you when you're 90? Think about it. If we don't care for our kids, if we don't mobilize to be boots on the ground to help our children, we have no one to blame when this great nation of ours goes into a descent and never comes back. And I know I'm speaking to the choir, but it's a message we need to make sure we get out broadly and we get out repeatedly. And so we decided that we were going to work with the 400,000 plus members of the ABA to add boots on the ground, to actually work to help children. And we did this because today countless teenagers and even younger come before the courts in what's called status offense issues, truancy, running away, being unmanageable, alcohol, drug abuses, things that if you did it as an adult might not be illegal, but if you're under the age of 16 or 18, they can get you in trouble. And teens and their families keep falling through the cracks. Our systems are not geared for them. Every year, hundreds of thousands of abused, neglected, and abandoned foster care children, institutionalized children, are put on the streets at the age of 18 because we think that without a family or a support group, they can go out and be adults and lead an active life. How many of you in this room have 18-year-olds that you think are capable of doing all that? And they had the love and the support of your family. And so we have been working strongly and hard on these issues for our foster care and our young people. Listening to the voices of youth. Do you realize how many children go through a court system, a juvenile justice system? Nobody asks them what they think about whether they should be incarcerated. Nobody asks them about where they should go or what should happen to them. And yet we know that the voices of youth are so powerful and that we should incorporate them in our legal systems. There are several 100,000 court cases annually involving abused and neglected children, and there are over 4,400 cases of delinquency a day in American courts. So what does all this mean? Well, for me, it meant that we needed to work in America to incorporate positive youth development perspectives into everything we do for children. It's an opportunity to promote young people's sense of themselves, of their competence, of their usefulness, of belonging and empowerment. And these kids need developmental services to build positive connections with adults. The ABA is still doing this critical work, I'm very happy to say. And I have gotten to see the work around this country that's being done in truancy prevention, in mentoring, in foster care transition programs. And we didn't stop there. We did the first all-China youth program, youth at risk program, because they still incarcerate youthful offenders with hardened criminals. I went to Quito, Ecuador, where I visited one of 2 safe houses, only 2 in the entire country, where children who've been trafficked into the sex trade are rescued and kept safe and actually brought back to being functioning human beings. That work was supported by the ABA. And so perhaps at this point in my life story, it's not hard to see why I wound up where I am today. Because about a year ago now, I received a life-changing call asking me if I would return from Prague to serve as the national president of Big Brothers Big Sisters of America. And I came with a light heart. I left my home of Colorado and have moved to Philadelphia during the worst winter they've ever had, the worst March they've ever had. And I have to tell you, I miss the West, and I do consider you in Arkansas the West. But it's because of a great love for the mission and the work that we do. You know, there are about 10 million young people, it's estimated, who would benefit greatly from a mentor in the United States. Big Brothers Big Sisters of America, through its 380 plus agencies around the country, is mentoring over 250,000 of those children. And we are the #1 premier mentoring organization in the United States, one adult, one child at a time, providing a safe environment with trained volunteer mentors and professionally facilitated matches. As I said, it was my privilege in the late 60s to be a big sister. I do hope to be one again soon as I'm on the ground long enough to participate in the program. My idea is that I'm going to learn about Philadelphia through the eyes of a child, and so I've staked my claim that I'm not learning about Philadelphia till they give me a little sister. You know, it's a great way to round out a career that began caring about children, that recognized from my family, from the military, from the nuns, how easily I could have gone off track, and that with the mentors I had in my life, what a difference they made in it. You know, for me, I will continue my work with Big Brothers, Big Sisters of America, and for our nation's vulnerable youth. President Kennedy reminded us that for those to whom much is given, much is required. You know, let me go back to the baby boom generation. Many of us are getting older, and we can't remember everybody's names. We can't read the small print. We don't do our aerobics as well, and we don't stay up as late. But believe me, that does not mean we're going to spend our retirement rocking on the porch. Not my group. And there's a lot of life left in the baby boom generation. There's also a lot of good to be done. And so today, as we move into, I think, a brief Q&A period, I want to challenge you, and I want to ask you to each make a continuing commitment to service. Whether you've just started your time here at the Clinton School, whether like Todd, you'll soon be graduating, you all have baccalaureate degrees, you've all had the education, you've all had the access, you've all had the best that America can provide to you. And so I want to ask you for your commitment, and I challenge you, no matter your age, no matter your condition in life, that at this moment you continue to mobilize your energies for your passions and do something for your community, do something for people individually, and if, like me, your passion is children, that you do something for the children of our country. Ask not if you've done enough. There's still too much work to be done. Ask not if you're finished. The work is not yet finished. Ask not if someone else can take up your part, because no one else has your experience. With commitment, the post-war generation, the baby boom generation, your generation can all make a big change in the world. You know, we're lucky today to have LaDonnie with us. LaDonnie Banks is one of our little sisters. She is the future of this nation. She is a bright future. She's going to be a pediatric doctor or gynecologist. And part of that, I think, is your uncle, but part of it is also Nicole, who has been her big sister for the last 8 years and is a radiologist. You are why we do this work, LaDonnie. You are our future. And if I look at you, I know we've got a very, very bright future. You know, I'm of a generation that started saying, don't trust anyone over 30. Now we say 60 is the new 40. As far as I'm concerned, that means we've all got at least another 20 years to do good. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We do have time for some questions. If you raise your hand, we'll get a microphone to you so everyone can hear you. Don't be shy. Okay, we'll start one off here. One of the unique parts of the Clinton School is our field service work that we do, whether it be small group projects in Arkansas or abroad. What's something that some of our students could do to either partner with Big Brothers, Big Sisters of Central Arkansas or abroad?
Thank you. That's a great question. The Central Arkansas, the North Central Arkansas, and the Northwest Central Arkansas are 3 agencies here in Arkansas. One of our big pushes has been to increase the number of minority Big Brothers, because our waiting lists very often are boys of color. And so as I look around this wonderfully diverse room, let me reach out very specifically to the African American and Hispanic men in the room and the Native American men. We are now working with 3 of the national fraternities, the Kappas, the Alphas, and the Omegas, to increase the number, and I see that we have some representatives here today, to increase the number of young men who will mentor. That kind of work, which is really community organizing work, and also with historically black university and colleges, would be an amazing thing for some of you to volunteer to do, to really make Arkansas one of those pinnacle states that we could use and say, this is the way it was done, and then to be able to take that experience and replicate it in other parts of the country. That's just one thought.
Todd?
Thanks so much on behalf of my classmates, I want to say thanks for coming out. Really appreciate having folks from the nonprofit field and people with your background to come out and talk to us and inspire us. So, but one question we talked about in the back, I think is real important to hear, is the vision or the future for Big Brothers Big Sisters. I'm dying to hear what your thoughts are and what your plans are for the organization.
Thanks, Todd. Every day I think about the challenges, the small ones of the day, but also the big ones. I think we have three things that we need to keep at top of mind, and they're not in an order of priority, they have equal priority. The first is that diversity and inclusion has to be in every single thing we do. We need to think diversely, we need to be diverse, we need to be part of the communities in which we serve, not just in the communities, but part of them. And so we are striving at all levels to recognize our limitations and to expand our horizons. The next thing is, going back to that 10 million number I mentioned, we're mentoring 255,000 children a year. Now, that has a lot more effect than just on 255,000 lives. Each one of them has an adult mentor, so now you're at 500,000. The average family in the United States has over 2 children, so let's add another 250,000. Probably more. Then there's a custodial parent, at least one. That's another 250,000. Now think about the classrooms that those littles are in and what effect it has in their classroom to have a child who is not disruptive, who is staying in school, who is bonding with teachers and friends. And so you can see the ripple effect in communities. Why do I say that? Because even if I add all of the communities that are being affected, we are not going to cover 10 million. We need, as youth-serving organizations, to collaborate, not to think about this is mine, but to open up our arms and to believe in abundance and in circulation. And that if we work together, we are going to lift the benefit of all of our children, particularly those who are most vulnerable and who need folks and programs in their lives. So I think that's the second thing for me. And you know, the third is that when you think about Big Brothers, Big Sisters, if I were to give you choice A and B, it'd be interesting to see what you'd say. But most of our focus groups say when people think about Big Brothers and Big Sisters, they think about being a mentor, and that it takes a considerable amount of time, and that at this moment in my life, if I'm a graduate student, if I'm entering a profession, I just can't do it. But that's not the only way that you can help. Mentoring costs money. Youth services cost money. And there's not a time in your life when you cannot contribute to a match by making a donation to your local agency. And you know, some interesting statistics, Todd. It costs $150 a day in the state of Arkansas to incarcerate a youthful offender. It costs $1,000 a year to have a match that is being professionally facilitated and helped in a very safe way with very strict background checks, recruitment, and training. So you compare it. What's going to result in something good for Arkansas and good for your community? The $1,000 a day we spend on a mentoring relationship, or the $150 a day you spend on incarcerating a youthful offender. So those are the three things I keep in front of my mind. Collaboration, diversity and inclusion, and being a donor-supported volunteer organization.
Emily?
I would just like to say something. I want to thank Big Brothers because years and years ago, I was a single mom. I still am. I had 2 children and was working a full-time job and 2 part-time jobs to raise these children, and got them in the Big Brothers program, my sons. They had no mentors, and if it wasn't for these Big Brothers, I'm just so grateful to the chance they had to turn out. The youngest one ended up going to West Point and became a Black Hawk pilot, served in Iraq, and he's now back at West Point as an officer. The oldest one became an FBI agent and just opened his own FBI office in Kansas. And they're still very close to their big brothers. They also went on to get their own big brothers to mentor. So I just can't applaud this program enough because they just took two children that didn't have a chance and changed their lives.
Thank you so much for that story. I'd only take exception with one thing, and that is with a mom like you, those kids had a chance. My own sister was a single mother, very similar story, and my nephew was matched when he was 8. He's 24 now, and he is still very involved with his big brother. He attended his big brother's wedding, and his big brother now has 2 children, so he's actually almost like an uncle. These are the stories that really do fill your heart. How many of you saw The Blind Side? It's a great movie. There was a reporter from the Hollywood Reporter, that's the industry rag in LA, and they picked 5 of the 10 Best Picture category nominees, and they called people who were involved in that industry. So they called me about mentoring and Blindside, and they said, you know, what did you think of the movie? I said, I really liked it. What did you take away from it? I said, well, you know, I took away that it was almost like a fairy tale story, wasn't it? I mean, 1 in 10 million, where a very wealthy family is able to help this young man. It was fantastic. And I don't want people to think, number one, that you got to be wealthy and you've got to, you know, get in quite in that level to be a mentor. But the other thing that I took away from it was the young men who were on the project stoops that were left in the inner city, and what a difference it would have meant in their lives if they had had a mentor. And that I thought that that was the meta message to take away from that movie.
Emily.
Hi, my name is Emily Fisher, and I'm a student here. I was wondering how the economic downturn affected your fundraising efforts, and also where you get your funding from, what sources, and if you have any creative sort of ways that you guys fundraise.
That's a really good question, Emily. I think the entire nonprofit community has definitely been affected by the downturn. I saw it at the Seeley Institute about November of 2008. Our national budget, when you coordinate all of them and add them up, is about $270 million a year. That's declined 10% from the 2008. So it definitely did have an effect. And you know, the local agencies are going to be different, so I'll just give it to you from the national. About a third or a little less of our funding comes from national grants from the U.S. government. One thing we have done is really tried to branch out, not just look at the Department of Justice as a source of grants, but also look at the Department of Education, HHS, Labor, and the Department of Defense. So that's one strategy, which I don't know if it's creative, but it certainly is necessary. The other large sources of our income are foundations, Kellogg, Annie E. Casey, you know, you name the large foundations that care about youth development, we are involved with them, the Edna McConnell Clark, and that's very important. And the third large tranche is from corporations, and that comes in 2 categories, cause marketing. We just did a cause marketing event, for example, with Gap. We've done one with Nivea, the hand cream. We're doing one with American Express. And the other is in corporate social responsibility. And it is very, very reassuring to see that the titans of industry do get that if we don't take care of our kids now, they're not going to have a workforce later. So we work with all of them. We are trying to expand that group. There's an opportunity, I think, for every organization, whether it's the Y or the clubs or Big Brothers, Big Sisters, to look for shared values at a corporate level and to see where the synergies match so that we can do work together. I like to think that one of the neat things we have going for us is we're one of the largest, if not the largest, opportunities to actually be volunteers. And so Comcast, which is a significant donor for us, has Beyond School Walls program where a number of their employees do mentor. And what they find is that having their employees mentor really makes them stickier with the company. They don't lose good people. They want to stay, they want to be part of the program. So it will continue to be a challenge. Even with foundations, you know, they do 3 or 5 year averaging. So even if you come out of a recession, they're not going to be ready to split with big dollars. And finally, you're looking for sustainability. Many organizations will give you money for a short term, but not for capacity building. Well, for capacity building, but once you've built the capacity, you have to maintain it. And the last portion, and it's particularly important in local agencies, is individuals and events. We are looking at our repositioning campaign as an opportunity to expand that part of our pie.
Okay.
My name is Rocio Ortega, and I work closely with the Latino population, and you mentioned the thousands of youth that are going to the jails in our country, and the need for minorities to be included in our mentoring programs. And I wonder what is the trend. In Arkansas, that is the emerging population, and we have just now learning some of the challenges that we have as we work with the Latino population in this area. What is your experience in other areas of the country with the Latino population, and do you have enough participation to mentor these programs? I also want to say that the Big Brothers Big Sisters program is one of the best in the nation. So congratulations, and thank you for being an active participant in our hope to help our children to have better lives.
Thank you. Well, the fastest growing group of mentees at Big Brothers Big Sisters is in the Latino community. Last year, 17% of our mentees were Latinos or Latinas. We have just entered into a new program with Univision, which is the largest Latino media company. And we are going to be working in line with our belief in diversity and inclusion to move more into a bilingual organization. There is a limitation on our resources, but some of you know that NBC and its parent company are, well, not really its parent company. NBC is being taken over by Comcast, and we have a close relationship with them, and so we are looking forward to working with Telemundo as well. Again, you know, if you look at the future of this nation, I'm from Colorado. 50% of Coloradans speak Spanish as their first language, and that will increasingly be the face of America. When you talk to Hilda Solis, the Secretary of Labor, she will tell you that within 20 years, 1 in 2 people coming into the workforce in America will be Latino. So we are very, very keen to continue working in the Latina community and to spread the good work we do. There are some very interesting things that we have done some research on, and some of them are cultural, and they're good things. In the Latino community, we find, for example, that in extended families, it is very important to mentor within your own family. So if you have nieces, nephews, cousins, someone who is a first-generation immigrant, then you mentor them. And so the word and the message that we want to make sure we have out there is that many families, particularly those that are new to the United States, don't have this extended family relationship. And so we need more, particularly from young Latino men, for them to be willing to mentor someone else's child or nephew or son. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Genneti Namara, and I come from Ethiopia. I'm also a big brother. My question is if you have any deliberate effort to increase the involvement of the minority groups in the Big Brothers Big Sisters activities.
Yes, we do. In fact, that is a very, very big push. We have both an African American initiative. As I said, we're working with 3 traditional African American fraternities, with the historically black universities and colleges. We have a large Haitian community, particularly in southern Florida, and many of our mentees are Haitian first-generation Americans. It is very important to us that we be a diverse and inclusive organization. Very.
We have time for one more.
Does Big Brothers Big Sisters have any element of working with system-involved youth, or is all of what you're doing more prevention mentoring?
We have 380 agencies. Some of them are working with older children who have been involved in the juvenile justice system. Some of our referrals, for example, are from juvenile court judges. One of our big programs is called Amachi, which comes from a Nigerian word, and I always mangle what it means, but it basically means, through this child, what has God given us? And it's an oversight term for children of incarcerated persons. Right now, about 100,000 children who have an incarcerated parent are being mentored in the United States. 50,000 of them are being mentored through Big Brothers Big Sisters agencies. The other 50,000 through a conglomeration, mostly of faith-based organizations. The statistics are very sobering. If you are an African-American boy, for example, and I'm just going to give you this one example, there are others in different communities, and you have a parent who's incarcerated, you have something like a 70% chance of also being incarcerated at some point in your life. We are interdicting that. We are changing that dynamic, just as we are changing the cycle of poverty. And so we think that that is incredibly important. And so I would say, on the whole, most of it is on prevention with young children who have a parent who's already incarcerated. But yes, we do work with juvenile courts. New York City is a good example of that.